This week and next week's videos were actually two jobs that I did together, but I wanted to keep them as two separate videos. Next week I'm going to be covering the full garden cleanup, but in today's video I'm going to be repointing our main patio. I'm going to be doing this in what I think is the easiest and most cost efficient way that actually gives you really good long lasting results. I won't be using any expensive resin products and I'll not be brushing in sand and cement that only usually lasts about a year. What I'll be doing is using the piping bag method, but before we get into that, let's start at the beginning. I laid this patio 3 years ago and I used the resin jointing compound for the pointing. As you can probably see, that's started to crumble and it's pretty much just resin sand now. I also want to sort out some of the gaps that are far too tight. This patio was my first ever experience of laying slabs, and although I did a pretty decent job, it's not up to my current standards. So I want to open up some of the gaps to make it look better. So the first thing I do is mark up the tight areas with a string line, so I can cut the slabs with an angle grinder and a diamond disc. There's quite a few of the joints I want to open up, so I go around marking and cutting them until I'm happy with all of the joints. After that, it was time to rake out the old pointing. You can do this a couple of different ways. I made a handy little scraping tool just to pull any of the loose mix out of the gaps. I could also have used compressed air to blow the sand from the gaps, or a decent pressure washer would also have broken out the old pointing. For ease and because some of the pointing was still solid, I ran the angle grinder around all of the gaps. I just used the same diamond disc that I used for cutting the slabs, but you do actually get specific discs that are meant for raking out mortar. Once the old pointing was all removed, I swept up the bulk of the mess and then I went round each joint and I used my shop vac to clean out each gap. You could also use a leaf blower, pressure washer or a hose for this. It was at this point that I cleaned the slabs with a pressure washer and some sodium hypo to get them spotless. I decided to clean before repointing because it fit my schedule better, meaning that I didn't have to wait a couple of days for the pointing to harden fully before pressure washing it. You could do this step after pointing or not at all. I'm cleaning up the whole garden and repointing the patio over 2 days. So this step was done between raking out and repointing, but I'm covering the full cleanup in next week's video. With all the joints nice and clear, it was time to make up the new pointing mix. I'm using soft builder sand and cement for this at a 3:1 ratio. You don't want to use sharp sand for this as it won't pipe properly. I add water to the mix and then some waterproofer and SBR. Then I use this paddle mixer to get it all mixed. Thanks to my dad for giving me his old paddle mixer. You could do this in a cement mixer, but mine's not spotlessly clean, and you'll need your mix nice and clear to allow you to pipe it properly. If you want your pointing coloured, you could add some mortar tone at this point, but I'm sticking with standard grey. When I first saw this method, I was told to mix the mortar to an Angel Delight consistency. The SBR and waterproofer do seem to help it become fluffy. It sounds daft, but it's the only way to describe it. I'm then using a mortar piping bag to apply this to the patio. Last time I used one of these on a video, someone claimed that mortar guns are better. But for this, a piping bag is far superior. You get far more mix in the bag, so it won't have to keep filling it up. And it also won't push the water out of the mix like a mortar gun can. Applying the mix is really easy. You just go around each gap with the bag and squeeze mortar down into the gaps until it sits proud of the slabs. Just like icing a cake. It's important that your gaps are fully filled for striking them later. Fully filling each gap will help give you a nice strong pointing. The downside of brushing in either the resin products or sand and cement is that you can be left with voids, and then these become the weak spots which fail over time. Using a piping bag forces the mix down into all of the voids. You want your mix to be wet enough to easily pipe into the gaps, but not so wet that it wets the slabs. Here's a clip of me piping the mortar into our yard area last year, where I made the first mix a little bit too wet. You can see that this is flowing too much and it's leaching water into the slabs from the mortar, which ends up marking them later. On a warm day like I'm doing this on, you can pipe your mix into all of the gaps and then they should be ready for striking once you've finished. The mix wants to be fairly dry when you strike it, just starting to turn crumbly. You'll want to use a brick jointing tool for this, and you basically just go around striking each join with the tool. Compressing the mixture into the joint, and then the excess pushes to each side, and because it's crumbly, won't stick to the slab. This means there's no marks left on the slabs. This is where, if you do it too wet, the cement in the water can leach into the slabs and stain them. When it's warm and sunny like this, the crumbly excess dries out really quickly and you can scrape it away with a jointing tool. I go around each joint and scrape off the excess crumbly bits, and then I go around with a soft bristle brush and sweep up all the excess. You could also use a leaf blower for this. Then that's us all done, and the patio's now looking pristine again, with nice even gaps and a much stronger pointing, which should last now for many years. If you look at these particular joints, it's a good example of one of the tight joints before, and then how much better it looks afterwards after I'd opened up the gap. Make sure you keep an eye out for next week's video, where I'm going to be doing the full garden cleanup. Then I'll be finishing this garden ready for summer series by installing some new lighting, testing out a new sprayer to paint all of the fences, and then in the final video I'll be making a new sofa type chair for the patio. So make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any of those future videos. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.